This game was one of my quicker 10 hours, and I am surprised at how much more of the game is left. I am starting to get a back catalog of games I want to finish due to these reviews. Initially, I really thought Hardspace Shipbreaker was going to be a totally different type of game. I started with the expectations of a survival craft in space, and while there may be overlapping mechanics, I would say it falls more into a simulation, task-based game, just with more consequences. In Hardspace Shipbreaker, you will start off getting hired by the Lynx Corporation's salvage division to disassemble ships. But first, you will have to undergo their asset replacement program for safety measures, which is about the point I realized I was being thrown into a good old-fashioned space dystopia. Bonus points for the late-stage capitalism. Nothing screams dream job like charging fees for almost everything provided, and expecting me to pay for anything that isn't. Oh, and the first time seeing my debts? Chef's kiss. One of my favorite things about this game, you will spend your entire time either in your hab or in the dock. I never thought I would appreciate being in one area in a game so much. Instead of sending you into the world, you will instead have the world brought to you in ships. Admittingly, with the differences between ships and how to process them, your location won't feel the same. Plus, the ships subtly tell their own stories. Gameplay is simple, but deceptively involved. The ships have cut points, which will require using your superheated space laser that absolutely will overheat and damage you. You will then be tasked with using your not Ghostbusters proton beam to move and organize the ship parts. And yes, these will absolutely kill you too if you run into them too hard. The ship parts are broken into 3 categories. To put it simply, common materials go into the furnace, rarer materials go into the processor, and complete items go on the barge. Sure, this may sound like Space Recycling Simulator, but as you level up your certification levels, these steps will get more and more complex. Ships will become layered, and will need parts removed just to access deeper into the ship. Then you will have electrical hazards, fuel lines and tanks that will explode, coolant lines that will freeze you solid, violent decompression if you puncture pressurized segments, and reactor meltdowns to make sure it doesn't get too easy. You start off with over $1 billion in debt. How's that for sticker shock starting with a new company? Then, Lynx charges you about $500,000 a day in fees. Then after your initial training, you are expected to cover your own oxygen and fuel costs, as well as pay for your own repairs. Repairs for equipment that you are being charged a rental fee for using. All this while taking on bigger and more difficult ships. Then, if you try to work on ships that are below your certification level, your payout will be reduced. Can I just say how much I love the hyper and late-stage capitalist dystopias that you can only get from games in space? The Earthen population just has too many hang-ups and expectations on human rights nowadays that making stories like this on Earth feels less realistic. But in space, company towns can easily be a thing again, or entire company planets. Hardspace does a great job showing what unregulated capitalism can look like. The only part I think the game creators got wrong was actually paying you normal currency for work. I've seen this before. Labor should be paid in company credit, only usable at company stores, so they can upcharge for the products they do offer. Now the controls are interesting. Hardspace does a great job of making the player feel the floatiness of space. Movement is very momentum-based, and it can take a little getting used to that your character isn't just going to stop when you let go of the button. And even when you do use your brakes, there is still some travel distance before stopping. Top that off with trying to build up enough energy to move larger pieces of the ship towards their deposits, and that the actions you use on this stuff will also Newtonianly act upon you. After about an hour though, the controls actually started to feel good. My only pseudo complaint, which I call pseudo because I can address it with button mapping, was just not having enough fingers to control all of the different movements I wanted. With keyboard and mouse controls, Using Q and A or E and D at the same time is difficult, and maybe some of the controls should have been moved over to the mouse. I did fall in love with the slingshotting myself around with the grappling beam's secondary function, even if about 90% of my deaths were caused by this. Simply put, lighter thing goes towards heavier thing, meaning you can pull smaller things to you, or pull yourself towards larger things. When using it to traverse, I really got the sense of speed when attempting to alter my trajectory, and how unresponsive the suit would be. The part that took a little longer, and I still had some problems with though, was orientation. Being used to two-dimensional movement, where the Z-axis is controlled, it is definitely jarring having to keep track of up and down. I was able to get used to where landmarks were supposed to be for alignment purposes when outside a ship, but inside, when you can't see those landmarks? I've already said in other videos I can get discombobulated without a minimap. Now throw in a third dimension. Oh, and the ship slowly moving around as you chop parts off of it, so the doors might be facing a totally different direction than when you start. I did a review for House Flipper, where I said how surprised I was with the enjoyment of it, because of its chill, task-based gameplay, leaving enough brainpower for active listening. Then after playing Hardspace Shipbreaker, I'm starting to think I really enjoy these task-based games. Which is funny because on the surface, I would tell you they look dumb and are just chore simulators. While not as chill gameplay-wise, and even under much more demanding decision-making and time constraints, I largely got the same impression of Hardspace Shipbreaker. So after 10 hours of gameplay, I absolutely recommend Hardspace Shipbreaker. There are plenty of different ships, with different layouts, and different hazards to address that keep the game from getting stale. There is a great sense of accomplishment every time you find ways of shutting off hazards, successfully extracting an expensive part, and successfully dismantling an entire ship. And if I did make a mistake and blow part of the ship up, I like how I felt a sense of trying to make the most of it. The resource managements feel pretty balanced, where it is something you have to keep an eye on, but not so overly demanding it keeps you from actually doing anything but surviving. And catapulting yourself around with a grappling beam is almost fun enough on its own, even with the risks involved with rapid deceleration. If you are also into task-based games, or games that may not require your full attention, give Hardspace a try. Thank you for watching.